which objective science calls phlogistomaticles, and certain of which on your planet the terrestrial learned physicians call nerve-brain ganglia, are formed of what are called Nereunosian crystallized vibrations, which in general arise in the completed formation of every being as a result of the process of all kinds of perceptions of their organ of hearing. And later on, these phlogistomaticles, functioning from the reaction upon them of similar but not yet crystallized vibrations, evoke in the corresponding region, which is subject to the given brain, the said vibro-ihonitanko, or as it is sometimes called, remorse. In accordance with the foresight of great nature, these said phlogistomaticles serve in the presences of beings as real factors for assisting the arising of the processes of association at those moments, when either the promptings arisen within are absent, or the shocks coming from without do not reach their brains. And the as yet non-crystallized Nereunosian vibrations in general arise and later enter into the common presence of the beings, either by means of what are called the vocal cords of every kind of being, or by means of certain artificial sound-producing instruments which the beings have invented. When these vibrations, arisen from the said sources, enter the presences of beings, they touch the phlogistomaticles of one or another brain. Then, according to the general functioning of the whole being, they produce the said process of vibro-ihonitanko. The second particularity of the functioning of the perceptive organ of hearing is that, in general, by the action of vibrations obtained from the sequence of sounds of every kind of melody, the association is usually evoked in the presence of the beings in one or another of the three brains. Just in that brain in which at the given moment what is called the momentum of what was experienced is increasing more intensively, and the sequence of the impulses evoked for experiencing usually proceeds in an automatic order. The learned musicians and singers then in the city of Babylon combined their melodies in such a way that the sequence of the vibration of the sounds should evoke in the beings a sequence of associations, and therefore also impulses for experiencings, not in the usual automatic order, that is to say, so that the sequence of vibrations on entering into the common presence of the beings should evoke the vibro-ihonitanko in the phlogistomaticles, not of just one brain, as it usually proceeds according to which brain at the given moment the associations predominate, but should evoke it now in one brain, now in another, and now in a third. Thus, they also provided for the quality, or as they themselves would say, the numbers of the vibrations of the sounds which would affect one or another brain. This latter, namely, from which vibrations, in which brain of the beings, which data are formed, and for which new perceptions, these data might be what are called determinants of new results, they were also already quite familiar with. Owing to these sequences of sounds, which they combined simultaneously in the presences of beings, different kinds of impulses arose, which evoked various quite opposite sensations. And these sensations in their turn produced unusual experiencings in them and reflex movements not proper to them. And truly, my boy, the sequence of sounds they combined did indeed affect all the beings into whose presence they entered exceedingly strangely. Even in me, a being cast, as they would say, in another mold, various being impulses were engendered and were alternated with an unusual sequence. It happened in this way because, as the sounds of their melodies, which they had combined in a definite sequence, entered into my common presence, Jartklam proceeded in them. Or, as it is otherwise said, the sounds were sorted out and acted equally upon all the three variously caused phlogistomaticules, with the consequence that the associations proceeding in me in the three independent brains, though simultaneously and with an equal intensity of similar associations, but differently natured series of impressions, engendered in my presence three quite different promptings. For instance, the localization of my consciousness, or as your favorites would say, my thinking center, engendered in my common presence, let us suppose, the impulse of joy. The second localization in me, or my feeling center, engendered the impulse called sorrow. And the localization of the body itself, or as once again your favorites would call it, my moving center, engendered the impulse of religiousness. And it was just in these unusual impulses engendered in the beings by their musical and vocal melodies that they indicated what they wished. And so, my boy, after all I've already related about this terrestrial contemporary famous art, I imagine you have enough to understand why and how, during the period of my 5th stay in person on your planet, I happened to be a witness of the events, of the causes of its arising, and in what connection, and with what meaning it was pronounced for the first time, just then, at that period which your contemporary favorites call the Babylonian civilization. So I will now already speak about those facts there, after learning which you will be able clearly to represent to yourself, and approximately to understand how greatly the logical mentation in all these three-brained beings who have taken your fancy must have deteriorated in so short a time, that without any what is called constancy of self-individuality, they have submitted to be made slaves of those few from among their midst who are called wastrels, and who, in consequence of the total loss of the divine impulse conscience, could for their egoistic aims create from this empty word art, which chanced to reach them, also such a surefire factor in all of them for the final atrophy of all the data that still survived in them for conscious being. When, during the period of my 6th and last stay there in person, I heard everywhere about this contemporary art of theirs, and came in contact with its results, and when I made clear to myself just what it was all about, then, having recalled my Babylonian friends of that time and about their good intentions toward their remote descendants, I made clear to myself more in detail as opportunities occurred just which results were obtained, from all that of which I happened then to be a witness, and about which I have just been telling you, initiating you now into the impressions hidden from strangers, and which became fixed in my common presence, and which were the result of my conscious perceptions during my last stay there in person on the surface of your planet concerning this contemporary art of theirs, my I, with an arisen and profound being impulse of regret, must now emphatically state that of all the fragments of knowledge already attained by the beings of the Babylonian civilization, which fragments, it must be allowed, also contained a great deal, absolutely nothing has reached the beings of contemporary civilization for the benefit of their ordinary being existence, apart from a few empty words without any inner content. Not only absolutely nothing whatever reached them of all the various fragments of general knowledge already